Okay, last week we looked at Daniel and how he lived in exile. This week we're going to look at Ezekiel. And I think I kind of have a rough roadmap on how this is going to go from here. I think I've got it sketched out. There's still some things I got to fill in, but I'll go over that at the end of this study. So, like I said, last week we highlighted Daniel, and we noted that Yah worked through him and in him, and he did that while he was in exile. Today we're going to look at Ezekiel, and we're going to see the same thing. Now, a couple of weeks ago, over the past few weeks, we've talked about Israel getting driven from the land, and then we've talked about Judah being taken out of the land and into captivity in Babylon. And they're in exile, they're not in the land, and Yah's still with them. And thousands of years later, we're still witnesses of that still taking place. Yah's with us, we're in the wilderness. We're not in the land. And he's still with us, and if he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, he's going to work in us. He always keeps his remnant, right? All right, so Daniel and Ezekiel, as we look at those two in particular, it's a good way to understand them as complementary witnesses to the same exile. Each one kind of stands in a different place, but they're serving the same Yah with the same purpose. Daniel represented the faithfulness within the systems of the world. Remember, the people he was around were the foreign leaders, right? In that he served in royal courts, he navigates the pagan power structures, and he remains undefiled while he's surrounded by pressure on all sides. His life shows how we, as Yah's people, can live obediently inside foreign authority without surrendering covenant loyalty. And through Daniel, Yah reveals that it is Yah that rules over the kings and rules over the empires and rules over the timelines, right? Now Ezekiel, on the other hand, he represents faithfulness among the broken people of Yah. He lives with the exiles, he bears their grief, becomes a living sign to them, and his ministry shows how Yah shepherds and disciplines and restores his people outside the land, even when the temple and the king and the nation are gone. Together they kind of form a complete picture. Daniel shows Yah's sovereignty over the nations. Ezekiel shows Yah's presence with his people. Daniel speaks to power. Ezekiel speaks to hearts. Daniel explains history, and Ezekiel explains covenant. One stands in palaces and the other amongst the captives, but both declare the same truth. So today we're going to look at 4 events from the life of Ezekiel while he was in exile. We're going to look at the vision and the glory that he received, or the vision that he received of the glory of Yah. We're going to look at him being commissioned as a prophet to a rebellious house. And we'll look at him as being dedicated as a watchman. And then the death of his wife as a sign. So we'll start out in Ezekiel 1. And this is the vision of the glory of Yah. Now, many of you that have read ahead several times, you've read through this. I'm going to summarize it just a little bit, but and then we'll walk through. We're not going to go through the whole chapter. I'm going to skip some of this and just pull out some things that line up with where we're headed here. So Ezekiel's ministry begins not in Jerusalem, not in the temple, but by the river Chebar in Babylon. That alone preaches a sermon, because God's glory is not confined to the land. The wheels within wheels, the living creatures, the throne above them all say one thing clearly: Yah reigns even in exile. Okay? The vision establishes Ezekiel's authority and reassures the exiles that Yah has not abandoned them. Before he even speaks a word, he sees that heaven is still open. He's called a prophet to the exiles because Yah is still present with them. So picking it up in verse 1 of Ezekiel 1. Now, it came to pass in the 13th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, that I was among the captives by the river Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of Yah. On the 5th day of the month, which was in the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity, the word of Yah came expressly to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzai, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and the hand of Yah was upon him there. Now, I'm going to get to that later on. So, verse 4. Then I looked, and behold, a whirlwind was coming out of the north, a great cloud with raging fire and engulfing itself, and brightness was all around it, radiating out of its midst like the color of amber out of the midst of the fire. Also from within it came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Each one had 4 faces, and each one had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the soles of calves' feet. They sparkled like the color of burnished bronze. The hands of a man were under the wings on their 4 sides, and each of the 4 had faces and wings, and their wings touched one another. The creatures did not turn when they went, but each one went straight forward. Now verse 10. As for the likeness of their faces, each had a face like a man. Each of the 4 had a face like a lion on the right side, and each of the 4 had a face like an ox on the left side, and each of the 4 had the face of an eagle. Now, if we have enough time, and I think we're going to, we'll come back to those 4 faces. So here he's seeing this vision, and that's how he gets started. And he's seeing it while he's in captivity in the land of the Chaldeans, and he's by the river. All right. The second point, he's commissioned as a prophet to a rebellious house. We'll start in chapter 2, verse 1. Here the calling, Yah sends Ezekiel specifically to the house of Israel, describing them as stubborn and rebellious. Ezekiel is told up front that many will not listen, but he must speak anyway. The scroll he eats, filled with lamentations and woes, becomes part of it. This is a powerful picture. The word must be internalized before it can be proclaimed. We've got to have it inside us before we can proclaim it. Ezekiel's not called to success, but he's called to faithfulness. To speak whether they hear or whether they refuse. Sometimes we can get frustrated if somebody doesn't want to listen to us, but Yah's telling him right up front, there's going to be many that aren't even going to listen. Now, I want to point something out. The phrase, the house of Israel, it's used 152 times in the New King James Bible. It's used 152 times. Of those 152 times, Ezekiel uses it 78 times. And we really need to have the context to understand who's being talked about where. Because remember, Israel started out as a man, right? Jacob's name was changed to Israel. Now, chapter 2, verse 1. And he said to me, Son of man, stand on your feet, and I will speak to you. Then the Spirit entered me when he spoke to me, and he set me on my feet, and I heard him who spoke. Here we see he's got ears to hear, right? And eyes to see, obviously, okay? Verse 3. And he said to me, Son of man, I'm sending you to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me to this very day. Now, going back to that house of Israel for just a moment. Where is Ezekiel at? He's in exile, right? Okay. He's in exile. Here he's in Babylon in the captivity. But at this current time, the whole house of Israel, the house of Israel that was brought up all through Exodus, that house of Israel, all the 12 sons and everything, everybody's out of the land right now. And that still happens to be the case. With some caveats. We do see a state of Israel today, but I don't think that's what Yah is bringing together right now, okay?
Well, it's a small portion of who's supposed to be.
That's right. That's right. It's a tiny portion of who's... So they're not... This is...
When he brings us into the land, we're going to live in peace.
Right.
There's no peace.
Mm-hmm.
This is talking about Yehuda.
Right. So, and he said to them, Son of man, stand on your feet, and I will speak to you. Then the Spirit entered me, and when he spoke, and set me on my feet, and I heard him who spoke, and he said to me, Son of man, I'm sending you to the children of Israel, a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me to this very day. For they are impudent and stubborn children. I'm sending you to them, and you shall say to them, Thus says Yahweh Elohim. And as for them, whether they hear or whether they refuse, if they are, for they are a rebellious house, yet they will know that a prophet has been among them. So, again, Yah's telling us up front, they're not going to listen. Verse 6. And you, son of man, do not be afraid of them, nor be afraid of their words. Though briars and thorns are with you, and you dwell among scorpions, do not be afraid of their words or dismayed by their looks, though they are a rebellious house. Now, you shall speak my words to them, and whether they hear or whether they fear, whether they hear or whether they refuse, for they are rebellious. But you, son of man, hear what I say to you. Do not be rebellious like the rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. Now, when I looked, there was a hand stretched out to me, and behold, a scroll of a book was in it. Ezekiel 2, verse 10. And he spread it before me, and there was writing on the inside and on the outside, and written on it were lamentations and mournings and woe. Does anybody else remember another place in Scripture there was a talk about a scroll that needed to be eaten?
Revelation.
Yeah. And so, I'm not going to do it right now, but if you begin to investigate both of those passages, you're going to see some similarities, and you're going to see patterns that are already there. Moving on to Ezekiel 3, Moreover, he said to me, Son of man, eat what you find, eat this scroll, and go and speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat the scroll. And he said to me, Son of man, feed your belly, and fill your stomach with this scroll that I give you. So I ate, and it was in my mouth like honey and sweetness. You're going to find that in both passages too, I think. All right? And then he said to me, Son of man, go to the house of Israel and speak with my words to them. For you are not sent to a people of unfamiliar speech or hard language, but to the house of Israel. Not to many people of unfamiliar speech or hard language, whose words you cannot understand. Surely, had I sent you to them, they would have listened. That's a powerful couple of verses right there. And remember, we're in a foreign land. They're in captivity, and they're still rebellious. They're still being hard-headed, if you will. And Yah's telling them they understand your words. They understand what you're saying. It's not like they don't understand what you're saying. Verse 7. But the house of Israel will not listen to you because they will not listen to me. For all the house of Israel are impotent and hard-hearted. Now, again, Ezekiel is going to only speak, well, we'll see that. I think we'll see that in here. Yes. He's only going to speak what Yah tells him to speak. So, again, he's a mediator between Yah and his people. He's the visible person that his people can see these words coming from. Verse 8, Behold, I have made your face strong against their faces, and your forehead strong against theirs. Like adamant stone, harder than flint, I have made your forehead. Do not be afraid of them, nor dismayed at their looks, though they are a rebellious house. You get the point. You get the point that Yah's making here in these first few chapters. These guys are still rebellious after being put out of the land, after their sister Israel being put out of the land, and then they kept up and they were put out of the land. Moreover, he said to me in verse 10, Son of man, receive into your heart all my words that I speak to you, and hear with your ears, and go. Get to the captives, to the children of your people, and speak to them, and tell them, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, whether they hear or whether they refuse. Now this mission that he's been put on, it doesn't matter what the response is. He's being told to do something. And that's what Yah expects him to do, and that's what he does. And I think when Yah said he made his forehead like an adamant stone, he gave him some stubbornness to follow through with what he needed to do. Because we can be influenced by people that are here, and people that listen to us or are listening to us, and those that don't want to listen to us, it can sometimes frustrate us if nobody's interested in listening. But in this particular case, Yah says, I know they're not going to listen, but you're going to tell them anyway. And that's going to turn up in the accountability column when it comes time to do balance sheets in the future. The third point is Ezekiel as a watchman. That's also in Ezekiel chapter 3. We'll pick it up in verse 12. Ezekiel sits amongst the exiles 7 days, astonished and silent. Only after he has shared their shock and grief does Yah speak again and appoint him as a watchman. His silence isn't weakness, it's obedience. He learns to wait and to listen and to feel the weight of exile before opening his mouth. Now, this wait and listen thing is a lesson that I'm still continuing to learn. Exile, Ezekiel in exile, he models humility and he models just restraint. He doesn't rush to speak for Elohim until Elohim tells him what to speak. In verse 12, it starts off, "Then the Spirit lifted me up, and I heard behind me a great thunderous voice." That'll sound familiar in some other scriptures too. "Blessed is the glory of Yah from his place. I also heard a noise of the wings of the living creatures that touched one another, and the noise of the wheels beside them, and a great thunderous noise." Verse 14. "So the Spirit lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness, in the heat of my spirit, but the hand of Yah was strong upon me. Then I came to the captives at Tel Aviv." I'm guessing this is a couple years before the airport was there, huh? In Tel Aviv. That was a joke, but I guess it wasn't funny. Okay. "Who dwelt by the river Chivar, and I sat where they sat, and remained astonished among them for 7 days. Now it came to pass at the end of the 7 days that the word of Yah came to me, saying, Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Hear therefore a word from my mouth, and give them warning from me." Now this is going to couple with what he just told them in earlier in chapter 3 and in chapter 2. He's to say to them, whether they listen or not, he's to tell them what Yah said. Now we're going to find out that Yah's holding him accountable for what he's supposed to tell him. Okay? In verse 17, "I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Therefore, hear the word from my mouth, and give them warning from me." Verse 18, "When I say to the wicked, you shall surely die, and you give him no warning, nor speak to warn the wicked from his wicked way to save his life, that same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood I will require at your hand." Why do you think that is? With what we just read, Ezekiel's only supposed to say what Yah tells him to say. And if he tells him to walk to a wicked person and tell him, that's what he's supposed to do. And if he doesn't do that, that man's going to die for his own wickedness, but the blood's going to be on Ezekiel because Ezekiel didn't tell him, if he didn't tell him. Okay? All right, verse 19. "Yet if you warn the wicked, and he does not turn from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he's going to die in his iniquity, but you will have delivered your soul, because he did what he was called to do." Verse 20. "Again, when the righteous man turns from his righteousness and commits iniquity, and I lay a stumbling block before him, he shall die because you did not give him warning. He shall die in his sin, and his righteousness which he has done shall not be remembered. But his blood I will require from your hand." Again, if you didn't tell him, I'm going to require his blood.
Hello, dog.
"Nevertheless, if you warn the righteous man that the righteous should not sin, and he does not sin, he shall surely live because he took the warning. Also, you will have delivered your soul." And
Little doggy.
Yah is making sure that these people understand that He's with them even in the exile. He's with them even in the exile. Because after being kicked out of your land and not having the temple that you grew so accustomed to, and not having the priests, and not having the whole system, it all being gone, I can imagine a little bit of despair, you know? But He's got His remnant. And He continues. Verse 22. Then the hand of Yah was upon me there, and He said to me, Arise, go out into the plain, and there I shall talk to you. So I arose and I went out into the plain, and behold, the glory of Yah stood there, like the glory which I saw at the river, and I fell on my face. Then the Spirit entered me and set me on my feet, and spoke to me, saying, Go, shut yourself inside your house. And you, O son of man, surely they will put ropes on you and bind you with them, so that you cannot go out among them. I will make your tongue cling to the roof of your mouth, so that you shall be mute and not be one to rebuke them, for they are a rebellious house. So now there's going to be a time, but when I speak to you, let me finish verse 27. But when I speak to you, I will open your mouth, and you shall say to them, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, He who hears, let him hear, and he who refuses, let him refuse, for they are a rebellious house. So now, Yah's saying He will make His tongue cling to the roof of His mouth. He's going to make sure he can't say anything until Yah tells him what to say, and then He's going to say it. Okay? That's what 27 is telling us. But when I speak to you, I will open your mouth, and you shall say to them. Okay? So, that's Him being designated as the watchman. He's among the people in the captivity. It's a whole different environment with different pressures than we went through with Daniel last week, right? It's a different crowd. In fact, it's family He's dealing with now. It's family that Ezekiel is dealing with. All right? So we got two different prophets running two different courses, organized by Yah, orchestrated by Yah, guiding what they say and what they do, and protecting them. Daniel had a lot of pressure. Ezekiel had a lot of pressure. Different kinds of pressure, different kinds of difficulty. But in the midst of the captivity, in the midst of the exile, Yah had His remnant. He was protecting them, and He was guiding them even while they were in the exile. The next thing here is a sign. It's Ezekiel 24, verses 15 through 27. This is the account of the death of his wife as a sign. So God tells Ezekiel that the desire of his eyes will be taken from him. And He commands him not to mourn publicly. His personal grief becomes a living parable of Jerusalem's coming destruction and the stunned silence that will follow. Here, Ezekiel, he fully becomes the message. What the people are seeing of him is what's happening to them, to Israel.
Wait for Marty.
And he submits even his deepest personal loss to Yah's purpose, showing that the covenant obedience doesn't stop when life becomes unbearable, when times get difficult. It doesn't stop. So, in Ezekiel 24, verse 15, also the word of Yah came to me, saying, Son of man, behold, I take away from you the desire of your eyes with one stroke. Yet you shall neither mourn nor weep, nor shall your tears run down. Sigh in silence Make no mourning for the dead. Bind your turban on your head. Put your sandals on your feet. Do not cover your lips. And do not eat man's bread of sorrow. Verse 18. So I spoke to the people in the morning, and at evening my wife died. And the next morning I did what I was commanded. And the people said to me, will you not tell us what these things signify to us, that you behave so? And then I answered them, the word of Yah came to me, saying, speak to the house of Israel, says Yahweh Elohim. Behold, I will profane my sanctuary, your arrogant boast, and desire of your eyes, and delight of your soul, and your sons and your daughters whom you left behind shall fall by the sword. Now, Ezekiel's in the land, but the temple hasn't been destroyed yet. But that's what Yah's getting ready to do here. And he's pointing out they had a lot of love for the temple and the things that were going on in the temple, but not the one that was dwelling in the temple. The temple, in a sense, had become an idol. And remember, when Yeshua was talking in Matthew 24, the disciples came up to him and they were pointing out to him, hey, look at all these stones. Look at all these buildings. And he says, not one stone is going to remain upon another. The same thing was kind of happening then. Once the temple was built, they were focused on the temple. Okay, and the traditions within the temple, and it was going through the motions, but I can't remember how it was put. I went through this just the other couple of studies ago.
Man-made motions.
Basically, yes. That's
man-made religions that was covered. And what didn't follow the patterns of the tabernacle. It followed its own patterns, its own priesthood, its own everything they did was never meant to be for offerings either. It was a house of prayer. That's what it was promised as, right? Right. And they did the opposite. It was more like a stumbling block. Like and that's what he's saying in this verse right here. Yeah. Well, go back to the Tower of Babel. Right. And that's exactly what the temple turned into be. So that's what he's saying here. This stumbling block right here, it's out of the way now. And you shall do as I have done, verse 22. And you shall do as I have done. You shall not cover your lips, nor eat man's bread of sorrow. Your turbans shall be on your heads, and your sandals on your feet, and you shall neither mourn nor weep, but you shall pine away in your iniquities and mourn with each other. So he's saying, I'm going to take all this stuff away, and don't complain. Don't weep. Don't mourn. He's been warning them for how long? Before they got taken out of the land. I mean, Jeremiah told us, even though Sister Judah saw what happened to the house of Israel, they still went on with their wicked ways. Well, Moses warned them too. Mm-hmm. Moses even wrote about it.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that too. And in Exodus, how this is actually a fulfillment of what was in Exodus and Deuteronomy 28. Yes. Yep. Thus Ezekiel is assigned to you, according to all that he has done, you shall do. And when this comes, you shall know that I am Yah. He's going to show everybody, his people and not his people. By the time it's all said and done, we hear over and over again, then they knew that I was Yah. Right? Over and over again. He will continue to do that. So at verse 25, and you, son of man, will not be, will it not be in that day when I take from them their stronghold, their joy, their glory, their desire of their eyes, and that which they have set, they set their minds, their sons and their daughters. On that day, one who escapes will come to you to let you hear it with your own ears. So that's how Ezekiel's going to hear what happened. He's going to find out that it did happen. And on that day, your mouth will be open to him who has escaped, and you shall speak to him you shall speak and no longer be mute. Thus you will be a sign to them, and they shall know that I am Yah. So, Ezekiel had a completely different time, a different environment than Daniel did. But both of them had a lot of stress. It took a lot of it took a lot of faith. That was a gift, by the way. I mean, Yah gives us what we need, and the direction Yah's leading is what got them through there. And by them being obedient, the fruit of their obedience was to those around us, those around them, and we're still gleaning from that thousands of years later. We talked last week. Am I about to cover that? Yeah, I'm gonna get to that in just a minute. Okay, so that's just a brief overview to show you the different lives of Ezekiel and Daniel. That's what the past 2 weeks have been. Different. They had different audiences. Yes, sir.
I just want to bring up verse 25, because that's exactly what Moses warned them about, is what they were going to do. In their pridefulness, they were going to take, what do I want to say here? They're going to take credit for all that they've done, and all that's going to happen. That's a pattern. That's going to happen again. This is part of what, we can get warned about for future generations. Is they're going to say, look at us, look what we've done. We've done all of this.
Right.
The same thing goes back to the Tower of Babel. Yeah, and Yeshua said the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those verses that just kind of,
Yeshua, when he says, look, when they say, look what we did, and he says, go away, I didn't know you. This is the same thing.
They're elevating works, just like what you guys talked about
Right.
a few verses ago.
Right.
But this is 25 is a key one. It's a key verse.
Yeah. And he took it away. Well, he gave it to him, so he absolutely had the right to take it away. And they were warned from Moses. It wasn't just, we've been concentrating on Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, but there's more places than that too. So now, you know how I like the continuity of Scripture, and you know how I like these things going together. I want to go back and talk briefly about those four faces, about the four faces on this vision that Ezekiel had. Well, before that, as I was just talking about Daniel and Ezekiel having different lives, Daniel was taken to Babylon as a youth. Ezekiel was taken as a priest. And if he was a priest, we don't have any indication that he did anything in the temple as of yet. But if he was a priest, he had to be at least 30 years old. So there's quite a difference between Daniel and Ezekiel in age. So Daniel served in the royal courts. Ezekiel served among the people. Daniel's ministry was focused on the faithfulness of daily life. Ezekiel's was focused on obedience through prophetic action. Yah spoke through dreams and visions to Daniel. He spoke through visions and symbols and commands. Like we just read, what Ezekiel went through was a forewarning to the people of what Yah was about to do. Then he did it, and he told Ezekiel, now you go back and you tell them they're to do what you did after the temple being taken away and all of that. All right. So Daniel lived out obedience quietly and consistently. Ezekiel lived out obedience publicly, visibly, and often painfully. Daniel modeled obedience under pressure. Ezekiel modeled obedience not only under pressure, but under humility. Daniel rarely spoke unless asked, and Ezekiel spoke when commanded, even when rejected, and he knew he was going to be rejected. So in Daniel, faithfulness is preserved him. In Ezekiel, obedience made him a sign. So Daniel shows us how to live in exile. Ezekiel shows us how to obey in exile. And if we tie it back to Psalm 119 from last week we were talking about, Psalm 119 tells us how to think in exile. Okay? So in Psalm 119, verse 1, it says, "Blessed are the undefiled in the way, who walk in the law of Yah." Daniel walked undefiled in Babylon by refusing the king's food and maintaining covenant loyalty, even when it cost him politically and personally. Ezekiel walked undefiled among the exiles by accepting the calling that made him a public sign, even when it isolated him from the community. So I'm going to give you 5 verses that show examples of the lives of Daniel and Ezekiel. So I'm going to read the verse and then see if we can point out where they... Well, I already gave you the one. Okay. In Psalm 119, verse 25, "My soul clings to the dust. Revive me according to your word." Daniel lived this in prayer and fasting, clinging to Yah's promises when visions overwhelmed him. Ezekiel experienced this literally. He laid low in the dust, struck silent, overwhelmed by the weight of Yah's glory and judgment, revived only by the Spirit and the Word. Verse 46 of Psalm 119 says, "I will speak of your testimonies also before kings and will not be ashamed." Daniel spoke Yah's truth to Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, and Darius without compromise, even when it meant facing death. He was talking to foreign kings. Okay? Ezekiel declared Yah's testimony to the kings and the princes and the shepherds of Israel, regardless of whether they listened or they resisted. In Psalm 119, verse 67, "Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I keep your word." Daniel, the exile refined him. Affliction sharpened his obedience and his discipline and his dependence upon Yah's revealed word. And with Ezekiel, affliction shaped his ministry, his personal loss, his physical hardships, and rejections became tools through which Yah taught obedience. And then verse 105, this is a real familiar one. "Your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." Daniel let the scriptures, especially Jeremiah, guide his understanding of timing, of repentance, and the hope of restoration. Remember, it was Daniel that said he knew by the books of Jeremiah that the 70 years was just about up. Ezekiel, on the other hand, he received Yah's word as illumination through visions, light breaking into exile.
That's a bush.
Revealing both judgment and future glory. Now I want to show you 5 verses, 5 times that the psalmist asked Yah for something in the midst of this psalm. And I really recommend, if you have a Bible software that gives you the ability to listen, sometimes Psalm 119 is a long psalm, but if you listen and read at the same time, you'll find it to be a blessing. And it really does strengthen us in the exile. And that's why I made the case last week. I think it was written in exile, and Daniel might very well have been the one that wrote it. So in verse 12 of 119, it says, "Blessed are you, O Yah, teach me your statutes." So the psalmist is asking to be taught for humble instruction, even while in the exile. That applies to every one of us, man. We could continue to ask that. Verse 34, "Give me understanding, and I shall keep your law. Indeed, I shall observe it with my whole heart." that understanding. It's a request for discernment. 36 says, incline my heart to your testimonies and not covenantness. They're asking to be requested for, they're requesting inward alignment with Yah. And then 25, verse 25, 119, verse 25, my soul clings to the dust. Revive me according to your word. A request for renewal, for strength based on what God's already said. Okay? Revive me according to your word. And then in verse 10 of Psalm 119, with my whole heart I have sought you. Oh, let me not wander from your commandments. A request for perseverance. Interestingly enough, you've heard me teach several times from 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through 11, how that progression, add to your faith, I don't even remember what it is now, but add to your faith and virtue. Add to your faith virtue, and to your virtue knowledge, and so on and so forth. That lines up with these verses that we're reading right here. If you want to go back in and study that. All right, now back to those faces. It's interesting that if you dig into this just a little bit, those four faces, you can assign a gospel focus to each one of those faces. In other words, one of the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John,
like that,
have
but it has a gold and
their gospel around, I won't say around, but it's describing one of those faces. I'll give you an example. But it also, you also can tie this to the parties, the four levels of understanding, of Hebrew understanding as you go through the scripture. Now let me give you some examples. Luke presents Yeshua as the one who walks among the people, as one of them. That's the face of man. That's the face of man that was in Ezekiel. Luke shows us one who walks. He focuses on Yeshua's humility, emphasizes his compassion, his prayer, his tears, his healing. He traces his genealogy all the way back to David, all the way back to Adam. It's not just David. And he speaks priestly language, intercession, mercy, and restoration. Matthew presents Yeshua as the rightful king, not merely a teacher. The lion is the king of the beasts, and Matthew is showing Yeshua as the king of Israel. He's the fulfillment. He's the royal authority. Matthew's genealogy begins with Abraham and follows a covenant down through David and shows that Yeshua does have lineage into that kingship. Mark's gospel presents Yeshua as a servant, the sign of the ox, the face of the ox. The ox works and serves and bears weight and keeps moving. And Mark's gospel is fast. There's few parables. It's constant action, minimal genealogy, emphasis on what he did, not long explanation. And John's gospel presents Yeshua as the Word made flesh, divine, from above, the eternal perspective, heavenly languages. Before Abraham was, I am, light of the world, glory, life. So that is interesting, to say the least. Now, if you look at the four levels of Hebrew understanding through the parties, we can match
Luke.
We can match them all. If we go with the Peshat, I think, now understand this. I'm not saying it's all under this one Hebrew understanding, because they write at different levels, each of them, okay? But it seems like the main gist, there's a main gist of it, and we'll start with the Peshat, and I think that's closest to Mark. He's telling us the plain thing. Yeshua walked along the Sea of Galilee. He found these disciples. You got Peter, James, and John, and so on. It's just plain. He doesn't go out of the way, or it's just pretty much what he says is what it is. Now the Remez is Luke. There's more to investigate. There's little hints, I think, in here. And the example from Luke that I'll use that'll make sense, I think, to everybody is when Yeshua was in the synagogue and he stood up and he read from the scroll. He read from Isaiah. We know it as Isaiah, 62, right? Isaiah is 61, 62. And the listeners that were hearing that would have known he stopped before he went through, and that's what this level is about. It prompts you to think about something else. It should remind you of something else. And when we go back and look at that something else, we want to. The more we put that in context, the more we understand exactly what we're reading here.
Oh no.
The drash. The drash is Matthew and the parables. Okay? And Matthew is full of parables. 13 is just got all kinds of parables. And there's things within what's being said to be understood spiritually. Not everybody has the ears to hear that. And of course, Sod is John. He ties directly back to Genesis. Just so many different levels in John that are so. Now, that again, not every one of them wrote fully from start to finish, but you'll find those levels.
I think if you took Mark and Luke, you could reverse it too.
That is possible.
Because when you look at the Peshat is the direct, it's just direct thing. This is exactly the way it was. This is it. And that's basically what Luke pointed out.
With Luke's detail, yes, it could kind of go either way. But it's hard to plug Mark into anything else. Right?
Yeah, Mark's about the only place it can be is one of those two.
Right, right.
Well,
So
John and Matthew.
yes,
John's the Soda.
yep. This has taken us now through the life of Daniel in exile and through the life of Ezekiel in exile. So here's the path I think we got before us, and that page didn't print, so I'm going by memory. But anyway, what we're going to do next week is we're going to briefly look at the prophecies that Daniel put forth and the prophecies that Ezekiel put forth. Both of the prophets put forth prophecies that many Bible students are watching. Some of them are watching closer than others, but we're watching for signs to happen, to know where we're at along the lines prophetically. I'll give you a sneak peek, okay? And this is about as accurate as we can be based on what we know in Scripture right now. I say that tongue in cheek. But here's the real deal, because Ezekiel wrote in chapter 34 that Yah was very upset with the shepherds that were leading his people. If you read Ezekiel 34, he's upset with them. He's upset with the sheep roughing each other up. And he says he himself will come back and shepherd the people. Now, Ezekiel 34 was written quite some time ago. But Yeshua in John chapter 10 says, I am the good shepherd. He's acknowledging that's being fulfilled. Okay? He's still doing that. He's still being the good shepherd. So putting dates on any of this is totally out of the question. But we can look for these things and see, okay, that's in progress.
Could you go up?
That's in progress right now. Okay?
Well, man tries to put everything in our time zone.
It just doesn't work.
Give it up because
If I tell mommy
time
the wolf,
is not an element to create.
Right.
I
Right?
could
right.
play the cops.
So-
Quiet game.
But we will be able to see things.
Gangster.
We will be able to see. For example, in Matthew 24, when that branch starts to get soft and bud, we're told that generation's not gonna pass away until all these things take place.
You know, a guy told me one time how many predictions that were out there of Yeshua's return, and they were all right, because they were all wrong. Right, David?
No.
So, we're just gonna look at a high level of that, of those prophecies. And we are waiting to see things happen. After we get done with that, in about 2 weeks, we're gonna look at Esther briefly. And then after that, we're gonna pick up on Ezra and Nehemiah and go back into the land. And then from there, we'll talk about the prophets that were in the land at the return. And we'll talk about the fact that the glory of God did not return into the land with Judah when they returned into the land. And then we'll talk about the 400 years of silence and Elijah, and we're getting into the spirit of Elijah and John the Baptist and getting into Yeshua. We're going to move on through that. It's going to take some time, but what I'm trying to do is build a road so that we can understand that it's a story. It's got a storyline. It's written for us not to be a bunch of individual books, but to tell us history, to tell us what happened and what's going to happen. So as we go through that, we're going to find some really interesting things, and when we finally get into Yeshua, we can start throwing back some lines and tying it back into the scripture that we've already been through on our way here, and begin to see how it all melds together. And this is going to be one of the signs that David himself was waiting for. The house of Israel to be recognized, and I think we both agree on this. We will see, when that happens, we will see events like happened during the apostolic times, miracles, and things like that, okay? So it's not going to be that group saying they're the house of Israel. No, it's going to be Yah showing the world that he is Yah, and he's doing it through the house of Israel. So, all right, that's all I got for you. Has anybody got any questions or complaints or? All right, very good. Now it's time to.
Receive the blessing.
Right on.